Let's talk about the formation of an agency. You can't have one if you don't form it. So, what does it require to create an agency relationship? Well, we've got certain conditions. Now, these conditions include the agreement between the both parties, which makes sense. Both parties have to agree to it. The capacity of both parties, and in some cases, consideration. However, the necessity for a written agreement varies depending on the situation. So, that would be something you'd want to know for the exam. When is it necessary to have it in writing? When is it not necessary? First, we're talking about agreement or consent. In order to form an agency relationship, there must be an agreement between the principal and the agent. Now, this agreement can be express, meaning that it's explicitly stated, either orally or in writing. So it's saying, I'm hiring you to be an agent, or it can be implied, meaning it's inferred from the conduct of the parties or the circumstances. That's something we'll see. You can have consent and agreement, even if it's not explicitly stated. Well, what are some examples with that? If we have an employee acting on behalf of the employer, maybe the employer didn't explicitly say, hey, go pick up the mail from the mailbox, but it's implied that that may be one of your duties. Or driving to the office, that's implied that you're going to have to do that. I will talk about many other examples as well. Now, for example, here, James hires Maria to negotiate contracts with suppliers for his business. They have an express agreement because they explicitly discussed and agreed upon the terms of their relationship. Now, in this situation, Maria could go and do other things that would be normal in that role, such as finding a new supplier, possibly looking through new product types. That may not be explicitly stated in the contract or the agreement, but Maria still has that within the realm of possibilities. It's generally understood. Written agreement. Now, generally, an agency agreement does not need to be in writing, as we mentioned. However, certain situations may require a written agreement, such as when the agent is authorized to enter into contracts involving real estate, which, undeveloped land, for example. And why is that? Well, just real estate, A, is important. It's usually big. B, we also have this requirement that if the agent's authority extends beyond 1 year, it needs to generally be in writing. Then real estate is generally going to last longer than a year. At least hopefully it will, unless something happens to it. And also real estate, it's just the more documentation of who owns it, everything like that. That's just also important. The law wants that to be in writing. For example, if Peter hires Susan to represent him in the purchase of a property, a written agreement may be necessary due to the nature of the transaction. A lot of examples, and that's what makes these lessons so great, is you're going to get to see how this all works. And these examples are pulled directly from what you're going to see on the exam. Next up, capacity. Both the principal and the agent must have the legal capacity to enter into the agency relationship. The principal must have the capacity to perform the act for which they are hiring the agent. The agent must have the capacity to understand the nature of the agency relationship and perform the tasks assigned to them. Now, a minor, such as a child, cannot act as a principal in an agency relationship involving the sale of real property because they lack the legal capacity to enter into such contracts. If you can't do something, then an agency relationship is not formed. If you were explicitly hired to be a CPA and you do not have a CPA license, well, that technically would not, that would breach the formation of this agency because you do not have the capacity to act as a CPA. Consideration. Now, consideration, this is essentially just payment. Consideration is not always required to form an agency relationship. However, it may be necessary in certain situations, such as when the agent's services are provided for a fee, or when the agent is required to perform tasks beyond their regular duties. So, for example, Sarah hires David as her real estate agent and agrees to pay him a commission for his services. In this case, consideration is present. However, it's not necessary. Let's do things for people for free, right? In conclusion, in order to form an agency relationship, we have to have an agreement. Both parties must have legal capacity. A written agreement is not always required, but it may be necessary in those situations we talked about. And we'll see more examples as we get through. And consideration may also be necessary, but it's not universal. Again, we're going to build upon this so much. We're just going to see so many examples. You're going to be quite the expert at this by the end. Let's talk about more situations when consideration may be necessary. So you can kind of think of this similar to the concept of boot, where we talked about that throughout tax, but it's also just essentially payment. Now, as we said, consideration is not always necessary for the agreement to be legally binding. Now, this is because the relationship is primarily based on the authority that the principal confers to the agent to act on their behalf, not on a mutual exchange of value. However, like we said, there will be some certain situations when the agent is providing a service for a fee. Okay, pretty straightforward. If the agent is doing this and wants to be compensated or needs to be compensated, then that compensation is consideration. Professional agents, real estate agents, talent agents, all of these types of, I'll call them middlemen, will be getting commission there, which is consideration. When a formal agency contract is created, so in some cases, the parties might want to establish a formal agency contract that's legally enforceable. In such cases, consideration would usually be necessary for the contract to be legally binding, just like any other contract. Number 3 here, when an agent is required to perform tasks beyond their regular duties. If the principal asks the agent to perform extra tasks or duties that go beyond the scope of their normal agency relationship, additional consideration may be necessary. And lastly here, when the agency relationship is to be irrevocable, if the principal wants to make the agency relationship irrevocable for a certain period of time, this is often supported by consideration from the agent, such as the agent's agreement to undertake certain obligations. Yeah, just get these down, be familiar with them. You can see a lot of this will be multiple choice questions. This entire lesson primarily going to be multiple choice. You could see a sim with different prompts, but this is fair ground for multiple choice questions. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.